joined by two panelists, two experts who are very well placed to answer many of these questions, which I will bring onto stage now. Darren Acker, who's the Director of Logistics Operations at Glovis America and overseeing a network of Glovis VPCs at ports and plants, as well as some 3PL ones. So Darren, thanks so much for joining us. Yes, please have a seat. Yeah, mic is on. And I don't believe related to our previous Jennings on the panel, but Adrian Jennings, who's the Chief Product Officer at Cognosos, a key player in real-time visibility tracking, so location service. So Adrian, thanks for joining us. Thank you. Have a seat. Great, so let's kick off. Let's talk about the role of the VDC, VPC. Clearly, they play a key role in the distribution chain, but I'm keen to kind of hear from both of you if you're seeing some changes in the roles that they're playing, not least in the context that we've been discussing in the last 2 days with order management, pipeline management. How is that impacting at the VPC level? And Darren, I'm going to start with you on that.
Well, really, the VPCs are obviously where everything starts and stops at as far as the vehicles that are inbound. And some of the things that we're looking at, I think that, well, I'm gonna say just us, I think it's important as an industry as the VPCs, have their challenges when it comes to labor, land management, and so on, or things like production planning. Being more precise with our production planning to make sure that we create efficiencies on the front end as well as the back end. And that's something that I have taken on as a major undertaking under my responsibilities under Glovis, to make sure that we are processing, in a fashion that supports efficient shipping. And I think times gone by, that's been a luxury. I think now it's a necessity. The logistics tail has to wag the dog, going forward. We cannot take those things for granted anymore and say that, hey, we can just process what we have and on the backside, it'll figure it out. No, that's not. That creates artificial dwell. It does not support, the most accurate and efficient ETAs management that our customers are obviously demanding nowadays. And it's what we need to do going forward.
Absolutely. So there's some key objectives there. Adrian, with the customers you're working with and technology solutions, what changes and opportunities do you see?
Yeah, I think it's the oh, it was quite loud, wasn't it? The lessening of the red-headed stepchild status. I mean, what's interesting in automotive supply chain end-to-end is the incredible investment that's been in inbound logistics and in plant operations, and then almost when it leaves the building, it kind of has traditionally gone into a black hole. So I think there's a new emphasis on making sure that there's visibility throughout, and weirdly that interconnecting piece in the middle, the piece between the plant and the railhead or the truck loading ramp, has been relatively invisible, and our supply chain is only visible as its most obfuscated link, and this has been the one. So I think there's a definite new emphasis on creating visibility there.
Absolutely. Just for the record, gingerhead people are beautiful, and I don't want any and as are logistics
no
people.
Offense meant.
And gingerhead logistics people must be the most beautiful in Darren, Glovis runs a network, just getting a picture of the network. I mean, there's quite a variety of ports, plants, some owned, operated, some run by 3PLs. Looking at the optimization of your network, are you considering additional locations right now, changing, consolidating network locations?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's important as the market changes, as the demand changes, you go from, inventory that is, unallocated or unsold when it arrives to inventory that is obviously 100% sold when it arrives. And the goal is to try to get that inventory or that to the market as fast as possible, as close to the market distribution centers as possible. So going from, ocean ports, looking at opportunities for inland processing centers as well is another opportunity that we're looking at, very closely now, that we know we don't need to have our inventory stored in transit anymore. You know, we want that inventory as close to the dealer as possible, so looking for those opportunities are key initiative that we're looking at right now for sure. Absolutely.
And when we unpack a bit more on the pipeline ordering and pipeline assignment of it, what is some of the biggest change that implies for your processing centers? Well,
the pipeline, again, this is something that I am passionate about when it comes to managing the inventory across the network. You know, I believe a lot of the tools that we work with now are centered around managing the pipeline, being able to meter and monitor our inventory based on where our pain points may be at. You know, I'm a firm believer in Power BI, you know, and we built some tools that help us to do that. We can look at the inventory, what's allocated, you know, what's in transit, what's on the ground at every location, you know, in our entire network, and then be able to plan production to support that, right? We want to make sure that we're not creating a problem, you know, that we can control and try to help. I can't say control, I'll say help mitigate. That's a better way of saying it, because sometimes you can't control it anyway. But help mitigate, you know, circumstances that may be inevitable, right? And we work with our rail partners and our truck carriers to help support that. So I think the pipeline management is another key component, and in using a lot of technology, obviously, and innovation to help, you know, create that visibility, to give us eyes where we couldn't see before. That's kind of the mantra we're into now.
And Adrian, where do you see technology helping to improve that visibility in the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember that technology doesn't solve problems, that it enables process change that solves the problems. But inevitably, in any process optimization, you can't improve what you can't measure, and you certainly can't measure what you can't see. So visibility is always step one, in whatever way, shape that visibility takes. It might be telematics, and in our world, it's about vehicle location through the process. But without that, without two things, without a solid, high-quality notion of historical performance and a solid, real-time view of the current status, then nothing else works. It has to start with visibility.
Absolutely. So I was thinking we might rename this conference ETA North America 2022, or maybe 2023, if we can get there in time. But so clearly that's one of the key topics across the sector, and you both alluded to it. Darren, starting with you, what is Glovis doing to optimize that ETA? And again, particularly within the VPC, how is that playing a role in that?
Well, the main component of it to manage ETAs is obviously, you know, forecasting, you know, from the standpoint of production and what's arriving at our ocean ports, knowing the allocation rates and percentages and parts management, that whole part of it, you know, and knowing our labor, you know, situation at each VPC to understand the throughput, you know, and applying that throughput, you know, to an ETA, and then being able to manage the exceptions. That's the main thing. I think we can provide ETAs, you know, fairly simply, but then, as everyone has been saying throughout this whole conference, that when things happen, that's when you have to react to it, and you have to be prepared for that reaction and manage the exceptions. And that's what I think our customers expect us to do more than anything, is as the supply chain, as the vehicles move through the supply chain, and we can see them moving, but when we have an exception, you know, where does that start to cause the buckle, you know, in the road? And they'll be able to manage that. I mean, perfect example would be, you know, vehicles that are flowing through the supply chain or through rail. We have, you know, vehicles that become inoperable at the ramps, or there are damages that may occur, you know, and that will disrupt the ETA right away, right? So being able to react to that very timely, you know, and we rely on our partners to give us that visibility for the vehicles that are in transit at the rail, identify those problems when the vehicles are discharged from the railroad, from the rail cars, and when our carriers show up. So we rely on them to provide that information. Hey, so we can get that vehicle into the repair cycle as soon as possible, update the ETAs, and then provide our customers with good data. That's kind of some of the things that we're working on and trying to improve upon as ETA management from a VPC standpoint becomes more important.
I mean, this is broad, and then things can happen, as you say, but are VPCs currently a more or less predictable part of your supply chain?
It is the least predictable.
Yeah, the least predictable.
Absolutely. I think we actually studied this already, and we've seen that's a portion of it that's the least predictable as possible because of all the different variations that create that unpredictability. Labor, parts, timely arrival of vessels, and all those different factors contribute to that. Once our ETAs are much more accurate, once the vehicles are released from the VPCs and are in transit, than the other side. So, and we're working toward improving that, and identifying some of the different pain points that create that instability. Yeah. So that's a major factor there. So
Adrian, what would be areas, now we see the problem, what are some of the solutions that we can make?
Well, one of the reasons that processes like this are unpredictable is that, and we often, when we sell visibility solutions, they often come with a health warning, which is you're going to be surprised at how your facility actually operates. And I can tell you that it's not how you think it operates. Right? So you end up with this kind of impedance mismatch between kind of a process design and process execution, and you end up being your own friction in a lot of ways. So providing that visibility, and even just to the point of the physical flow. I mean, we heard mentioned earlier about just the unnecessary moves that get made within a VPC. Even just getting into visibility to the fact that that's happening, to the extent to which it's happening, and then try to burrow into why it's happening, and how to. Maybe it's a training issue, maybe it's a process issue, maybe it's a facility layout issue. But certainly the unpredictability, but a big piece of it comes from the fact that you're not even necessarily executing the processes the way you think you are.
I agree.
That's interesting. So Darren, have you checked your VPC health, and were you a bit surprised at how few steps, or how many steps in this case? This might be the opposite of a Fitbit. Too many steps that would be.
Well, but to his point though, I think I go back to the production planning side of it. I think that when you're looking at your network and you have a vessel schedule, you have vessel arrivals, 4 years ago, vessels were on the water and arriving, with a smaller percent of vehicles sold than previous. Now they're 95, almost 100% sold when they arrive for Glovis America's customers at least. And before that, planning the vessel discharge and the whole production process meant planning to store cars, right? And a smaller percent of cars were allocated. We run them through the building and no problem, easy peasy. Now, it's a matter of placement of the vessel, and I'll go back to my other term, precision processing. Whereas we are processing these vehicles based on a couple different factors in my mind. Obviously the percent of accessorization rate per vehicle, grouping those cars up into those different buckets of accessorization, labor time on each vehicle, where the vehicle destination is going to be going to based on the time of the month, and we have to make a wholesale goal and processing our long distance vehicles earlier in the month, and as we progress through the month, we move towards some of those smaller, the shorter distance destinations as well. So that precision processing has to be, a major component of what we do. My ideal, scenario would be, my truck carriers, terminal managers wake up in the morning, and he comes into the office and he turns on his computer, and I've just released to him, 10 loads, 2 drops per load, and 8 cars per load, and he's happy. I think any one of my carriers out there would be happy to see that, as opposed to something much less than that, and he's going to hope that I can process a few more cars to help complete a load for him. So our mantra has to change, and looking at things from a standpoint of, again, processing and developing a production plan that supports efficient shipping. No longer, it cannot work the other way around. You know, if we continue down that path, we're only going to create, you know, bottlenecks where we could have controlled it otherwise.
What's standing in the way of it now? That's your hope to make your terminal manager and carrier happy. I'm guessing he's waking up in the morning and not quite getting slightly more stressful messages.
He's not getting there. He's not getting there. And the things that standing in our way, I think, are just mainly just the concept and implementation of this precision processing. And then change management is hard, and we've been doing things a certain way for a long time, and people have to get on board with it, as well as bringing in the technology to develop this production planning tool that will help to create that the algorithms that'll pull from the inventory and tell us where the cars need to go, when they need to be processed, when, where, and how. And that's the other part of it that we're working on right now. I think it's important.
Yeah. Adrian, I know in your world you deal a lot with getting data off the edge and processing power of the cloud, or cloud in the edge, as sometimes the case. Do you see that as the key path to find this optimization?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm a little bit less of an AI skeptic in 2022 than I was necessarily in 2020, despite working for a company that claims AI as a core part of its product. And why was I skeptical? Because I think that there's a massive scope for the application of just normal human intelligence to improve processes. There's low-hanging fruit. If you just had the data in real time, the quality of data that you had, there's low-hanging fruit that doesn't require any particularly sophisticated machine learning just to make those improvements. And that, you know, planning to the precision you're talking about is one of those. Now, that's not to say that that machine learning can't help dramatically, and I do see the coming of the age of machine learning in these processes now. The stars are aligning there where there are the data sources to feed them. And there are problems too big for the human mind to kind of grasp from end to end. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely, I think we're on the cusp.
I mentioned in the beginning, labor shortages, labor challenges. Darren, paint us a picture of what that's been like at your VPCs. Has that been a struggle with staff turnover? Has that been easing? What's the status right now?
Yeah, labor is for everyone. As obviously, it's been one of our challenges, and at our VPCs with attracting and retaining, you know, labor, especially I wouldn't call it post-pandemic because we're not really posted, but once the restart occurred, you know, bringing folks back to work was a challenge. You know, we had to do a lot of different innovative actions to help attract people to come back to work. And obviously money was a key factor there. And we have actually made a lot of progress there. And for Glovis specifically, in our location where our two VPCs are located at, or the majority of our domestic plants at least, we have a lot of competition in those areas, you know, when it comes to other suppliers, other manufacturers and whatnot. And so we have to be very competitive. We put a lot of pressure on our HR team to be very creative when it comes to talent acquisition, and they've done a good job. We've actually turned a corner. We definitely are in a much better place than we were before. I know our partners, our rail and our our carriers are also, you know, looking for ways to be innovative when it comes to attracting talent and retaining talent, you know, and we're starting to see some progress there. We are seeing some progress there.
You know, one of the things that has come up, and Mark Anderson from the Road spoke about it, you know, a way to retain drivers is actually to make their jobs better, yes. To remove inefficiencies. That's actually driving a lot. Absolutely. Obviously, that could reduce a certain requirement for a certain quantity, but even more importantly was actually the satisfaction of the driver.
Absolutely.
And Adrian, when we look at VPCs and distribution centers today, I think that's been a key point for you in the technology that Cognosos has used. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it goes along with VPC actually, and you know what we do has direct impact on the quality of the working day of the drivers as well, the truck drivers, and don't forget there's a lot of drivers on side of the VPC too, and that I think we've seen our customers really struggle to retain those staff, the more unskilled labor that's on site. Driving cars around a giant yard is not a fabulously fun job in a Georgia summer nor a Michigan winter, So there's a lot of turnover there, and we'd see people operating at 50% of normal capacity there. So part of it is about efficiency, and it's about making do with fewer people, and that's a good thing, and a thing that is ongoing. But it's a little bit about morale as well. I mean, the point of a real-time visibility solution is to help optimize workflows and to help remove errors from the process. And there's none of us who enjoy a day when we feel like we're doing work that just isn't making a difference, or we're frustrated waiting for something, or mistakes happen and nobody enjoys making mistakes. So making people's lives better is about providing the support tools to make sure that they always feel like they're adding value, that they're never spinning wheels. And it goes to truck drivers too. I don't think there's probably any more frustrating part of a hauler's day than sitting waiting for hours to get a load. And so expediting that, supporting VPCs in kind of providing concierge services, which are more common these days, to pre-stage a load so that when the hauler arrives, it can just load right up and leave. That has a direct impact not only on the truck drivers, but on the ability of the VPC to be a shipper of choice and actually make sure they're prioritizing getting the haulers to the site in the first place. You don't want to be the place that no one wants to come with the truck.
No, absolutely. And is those initiatives that Glovis has been working on?
He took the words out of my mouth. Exactly. I mean, those are exactly the things that we were, I think, were beforehand a few years ago, prior to the pandemic and the whole labor situation we're in, were not necessarily, they were luxury. I think it's nice to have. Now it's a necessity. I think making our locations more efficient, geobaying, valet services, those are things that we need to be able to implement, in a major way. The drivers, they come through our yards, spending 3 hours loading with a 7 or 8 car load, and like you said, walking around to find the cars, and that's the thing of the past. We want those guys in and out, with the least amount of stress, because their clocks are ticking, even when they're not behind the wheel of the truck. And we want them to be efficient. I think, like you said a minute ago, making our locations more attractive, because the drivers can pick and choose where they want to go. And if your location is inefficient, unorganized, and going to keep them there and take money out of their pocket because they can't do multiple loads a day or can't get home at night, then that's going to make it worse for them and make it bad for us. So yeah, I 100% agree. That is what we need to be.
Yeah, certainly. We're wasting the time of these drivers and workers. It's money out of their pockets. It's money, frankly, out of the operators' pockets as well,
Absolutely.
and the shippers' pockets. As you alluded to, the VPCs have important production functions as well, post-production modifications, accessories, work like that. Are you managing or having to mitigate parts shortages in that side too? So battling for critical parts, not least in the context of vehicle plants struggling with this as well.
Yes.
And how do you manage that?
Yeah, this is another challenge, because like all the other different segments of business have, supplier issues and have their own part shortages. Accessory parts are a problem. We have campaigns on vehicles, and there may be part shortages there as well. I mean, the visibility and the forecasting of it is the most important thing. Like I was saying earlier about looking at our production plans when vessels are at sea, and have a clear understanding, up front, what of that manifest has certain campaigns on it, what's the allocation rate, what's the pin rate of the PIOs that are on the cards, and where the shortages are at. And identify that as quick as possible when that manifest has been loaded into the system, and then we come up with a production plan that supports that. That creates that, that creates that efficiency that we need to see. And then obviously working with our partners to get again, ETAs on the parts that are short, and then when they're going to come in. And in some cases, we have to go through a process to take parts off the cars, meaning that we decommit the parts, and we process them without the parts, and we move them forward. That is the least, likely scenario we want to go to, but it does occur on occasion.
And I can imagine triangulating that with the ambitions for geo-based loading and optimized releases, this perhaps one of the factors that gets in the way. Yeah. I mean, that definitely plays a part in it. I mean, that geo-baying and how we orchestrate that. I was going to say, the way the geo-baying, in my mind, we want to see it work is that when cars are released from the VPC, they are already assigned to a bay location, when they're released, and that either by carrier or by destination, whatever have you. And there's many different variations of geo-baying that depend on your location. But and then the way the system and the way that technology should work is that bay location that is freed up when that vehicle departs the yard, the system or the algorithm is going to look for the location the closest to the front to the gate. That way you're automatically consolidating your yard. You don't have that Swiss cheese, or you're filling up the holes, that's close to the yard. That creates, that minimizes conveyance. It minimizes the need to drive around and look for a spot, and it creates that efficiency that we want to have. So that, along with the valet services and the shuttle services, all those things I think will help create that efficiency, help minimize, downtime when it comes to other concerns.
And I think that's just, an important point that's sometimes overlooked is the as valuable as the information about where things are is, equally as important as where things aren't. Right, so available bays, but in terms of managing the yard, but it comes into the processing center itself as well.
Yep.
And when you're trying to maximize throughput, you are trying to keep all of your work bays occupied and utilized 100% of the time. And an empty workstation is throughput gone begging. And knowing the micro motion of vehicles, even through that process, can
Absolutely.
help you massively improve utilization of those resources and the expensive labor
Right.
in there. And we've seen people make 20% throughput improvements just by better managing of their existing resources, which comes from knowing where things aren't, knowing where the empty bandwidth is.
Yeah, I'll jump in with that one, because I mean, we're looking at even the time that it takes for the vehicle to be actually released to the carrier from the time that it is bayed in the bay location. That has to be as close to real time as possible. We want to take as much advantage of day zero of when that car was released as possible. I'm looking at data that tells me what % of my vehicles are released at each location before 1300, 1 o'clock. Because in my mind, an optimal situation would be at least 70% of today's production is released before 1 o'clock. That way, I'm giving my truck carriers an opportunity to build that car into a load where that truck can show up the next day. We're taking full advantage of day zero, right? So that way, I'm better utilizing the yard, because there's no dwell. We minimize the dwell because the bays are released. And I'm looking at day of the week. What's the most optimum day to have the majority of our vehicles processed? We can see, knowing that there's limited deliveries on the weekends. It's obviously not as many dealerships as willing to take cars on the weekends. So what's the most optimal day to do our work overtime, for example? Perfect example. What's those optimal days to work overtime to make sure that we can, if we put the cars in, we release the cars, are they going to ship? So what is that peak from Wednesday to Thursday, or from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is probably the best time to make sure that we are maximizing the need to work overtime. Because that way, Thursday, Friday, Monday, those cars will ship. And we, again, looking at time of day of the week, all those different types of data points matter, and it creates that efficiency, and it's with the things that we can control, as a service provider, I believe, to help manage through all the other obstacles we have out there right now when it comes to, driver shortages and labor shortages and so on. There are things that we can do to help create efficiencies, and it makes a difference.
When we look at the technology to improve visibility, now obviously real-time tracking location is a key one. Some use RFID, and we've also heard a couple of times over this event and previously potential of telematics, the vehicle itself. It seems to me that it's not an either or it's not a single option. It's as I think it was Christine and several others said in the last session or in the morning session, you take the data from everywhere that you can. If you look at telematics, so is that something that is starting to play a bigger role in some of your VPCs, or do you see it starting to, and where are the potential and where are the limitations?
Yeah, I believe it is. I think so. I mean, having to be able to communicate with the vehicle, and being able to determine, where the vehicle is in its condition at the time. If it's the state of charge of the battery is at a certain point, do we have a low pressure in tires? Is there any types of codes already existing in a car that will help you understand where the car needs to go in your VPC, for services or for different types of campaigns, and that type of data being provided, to the VPC management team is valuable.
Yeah,
absolutely valuable. Above and beyond ETA management, that information will be valuable as well.
So that condition bit is important. Adrian, I think, I guess I can see it's accurate, but then it's probably not accurate to the point, right? So it's probably best in combination with
yeah, definitely a combination is the way to do it. And what we strive to do is to create the most accuracy that we can without becoming the $3 million solution that nobody would purchase. And that's been the traditional thing that's held back visibility in the marshalling yard. It's a very difficult place. It seems crazy because it's wide open, but it's a very difficult place actually to keep track of very precisely where vehicles are. You can't go and put a whole bunch of new infrastructure out there. They tend to get a bit mad when you ask them to put poles up and start directional drilling fiber optics under the concrete. That doesn't have. So the balance is with all of these kind of data sources is what is the best way to get the high quality data that you need at a cost point that delivers an ROI, and that means probably multiple different places, because best in class for this isn't necessarily going to be best in class for that. So I think there's been this kind of, over time, there's this idea of just conglomerating everything into a single point, but that thing ends up becoming now ungodly expensive and not really viable. So yeah, multiple data sources, and we have the tools to manage that today. I mean, gone are the days where we cared about that, jam it all in a data lake, throw an AI at it, and off you go. I mean, that really is a reality now.
Absolutely. So, we've seen some increase in online ordering. We've had discussion over direct-to-consumer models, etc. If we look to changing business models of the future with more online ordering, do you see this as also having a changing impact, changing the way you run VPCs as well, and if so, how?
Well, sold orders, and that's a term when you say the word online ordering, it relates to me in terms of sold orders.
Right.
So although we have allocated vehicles that are sold to a dealer, we also get notifications that cars are sold to a retail customer. So that is another, action and activity that we have to kind of, implement into our production plan to make sure that those vehicles are available and are kind of put to the front of the line, because again, potentially a customer has placed an online order for that vehicle before it had even arrived. So, again, going back to the production planning, another component of it is to look for those sold orders, identify those in your pipeline, and manage those through the production plan as well, and make sure that they get the priority that they would require. Because again, a retail customer is looking for it. And I think everyone else, some of the other panel members was talking about how they get calls. I get calls from retail customers saying, "Where's my car?" You know, I've gotten that phone call or an email from, you know, a retail customer saying, hey, where's my car? So, I mean, yeah, it definitely starts at the production side.
Absolutely.
I think there's an interesting angle here that slightly terrifies me actually, which is you know, the more online ordering and the more kind of direct fulfillment, the more buying cars seems like buying things off Amazon.
Exactly.
And the more visibility we want to give the retail customer of the supply chain, the more we expose a part of the car building process that people don't really understand or appreciate. Nobody really understands how many people have driven their car before they get it.
Yeah.
It could be 50 people end to end. I think there's a notion that cars kind of come out of factories and jump on trains and off they go to the dealership and you pick them up and that's it. So I do think there's two things there. One is there's like this extra level of scrutiny that will come the more we give the end user visibility into the supply chain.
Absolutely.
And there's also a little bit of education to do there as well, which is probably a good thing. If people, you know, I think, you know, it's going to take however long, 6 weeks to get your vehicle, and the question is, well, how hard could it be?
Right.
It's so hard. You have no idea. But if consumers maybe could understand that a little bit, then I think there's probably a little bit more appreciation for just, you know, what goes into getting this car to you and at the quality and the spec that you expect.
Well, the one thing that's helped us with that is in Glovis's world is that we have more, we have an audience now with our dealer council, you know, and our executives, we meet with them, you know, monthly, and we talk about the supply chain challenges, right? And we're able to educate them on logistics and, like you said, you know, what are the challenges we have to go through and what we're working on to help make improvements. So that's valuable, and they pass that on to their actual salesmen, who we are hoping are also educating their retail customers as well. So that's important. I think there will be that, like you said, you know, that concern that people have when they don't understand it, don't know, but now they want to know, because now we're giving them that information. You know, it's required, you know, like Amazon, hey, where's my car? I want to be able to get on my phone and see it, you know, from one point to the next.
Especially when you pull your app out as a consumer and you look at the history and all you see that it's bounced for 3 days all around the VPC, and it's like, they're not even doing it.
Exactly. It's so funny. My daughter just bought a car, and she's learning, where's my car? Dad, where's my car? Where's my car? So yeah, it's definitely real, and it's definitely that Amazon effect is out there for sure.
Yeah.
Now I understand the really stressful customers you have calling you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And not to mention, as we heard right at the beginning of the conference yesterday, right, from Steve's center, that's where the money comes into the bank, right, when the car actually ships and arrives. So this is definitely a major focus. Last question. I usually like to close with sort of looking ahead for your vision of a truly optimized kind of facility, you know, at some point in a decade. But my feeling is often with this is the technology is there, and it's not really 2030 where it needs to come. It is there. It's more the process. So what needs to happen to make that fit for purpose VPC today? Because it should be possible.
In my mind, it's going to be definitely working backwards from the truck carrier and what their requirements are, what their needs are, our rail team and what their needs are, and then working backwards from there. Understanding clearly where those pain points would be, and then manage from there backwards. Production planning, optimizing the yard utilization, providing all the different types of services, geobaying, valet services, to help create efficiency within the yards and inside the VPCs. That's just going to be the key to success going forward. It has to be. It's no longer something that it's a nice to have. Yeah. It is a requirement at this point.
Anything you'd add, Adrian?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you go back 15 years, everything was about lean, and if you go back a few years on the production side, the assembly side, lean started to get a little tarnished, and people started talking about things like resiliency and agility, and I think that's propagating forward through the supply chain now. Kind of talk about a little bit about, you see this a lot in manufacturing. I call it plan and pray processing, where there's a whole lot of planning and then kind of praying that nothing goes wrong. And that's propagating out now of the supply chain, and there's a lot of that in the VPC. So I see the VPC moving now beyond plan and pray into kind of plan, observe, react, optimize, replan. Yeah. So agility is the key, and the ability to, when we talk about scale as well, often the inference is we mean scale up, but the ability to scale down is key in two different ways: to scale down to lower inventory levels, but to scale down to smaller atoms of things you're thinking about, down to every car is an expedite because they're already sold before they even hit the VPC. So I think it's about agility and getting beyond the plan and pray era.
I would definitely agree with that. I think that's one thing that me and my team talks about quite often, is about the ability. Standardization is great, but we need to have the ability to expand as needed and be agile, to what our customer needs may be, because they're ever changing. If you're so hard and rigid on your processes and aren't able to flex as needed, that's going to create a lot of pain. So, flexibility, agile.
Those are the key words to leave us with, to avoid this world of pain.
Yes.
Thoughts and prayers are not enough in the VPC, so we need to have actions. But I want to thank our panel for. I think it's a great discussion. I think it really brought together so much we've been talking about. Thank you so much, Darren, Acker, Adrian, Jennings.
Thank you, guys.